So, by request, I'm going to be doing the adapted 2016 paper. The adaptation throws in a little bit of inheritance. And reminder, when you create your project, make sure you have Java with Ant selected. And I will call this adapted 2016. And I'm going to untick create main class and finish creating the project. On screen now, you can see the root folder of my adapted 2016, and I have put weddings.txt in the root folder. If I go look at files and I expand, you can see I've got weddings.txt, so my project is going to be, NetBeans is going to be able to find the text file. I strongly recommend actually reading the blurb, because it does, you often need to answer the questions with some knowledge of what's happening. So essentially what we're doing is we are creating bookings for a wedding. We've got two venues, a garden venue and a lake venue. This can hold up to 130, this can hold up to 160. Those may come up useful as array sizes. And then we're going to have some objects. A wedding, which has got a bride, a groom, a wedding date, a venue, and a number of guests. And then a booking day, which has got a date, and then a garden or a lake, which we'll presumably create a little bit later. And we've got weddings.txt, so you can see over here we've got what looks like a name, hashtag, another name, presumably those are two people being married, and then a date, and that looks like a venue, and then a number. And over here you can see that for those represent bride, groom, wedding date, venue, and guests. So question 2 should be quite straightforward by now. Use the class diagram below to create a new class called wedding. The class will be used to create objects that will store the details of one wedding booking. The diagram below indicates the properties and methods that are required. It's quite important to do these questions with reference to the class diagram, so I'm going to have them up, we'll have it up as I am coding. You do not need to worry about a package whatsoever, so I won't bother creating a package. I'm just going to straight away create a class, and it is called wedding. Okay, and I can see over here I've got some properties. I am going to stick to the questions, so I've done 2.1, and then write code to create the 5 properties for the wedding classes indicated in the above class diagram. So I've got private, very important to remember the private. Private string groom, private local date. So reminder, they're going to be called dates. You're going to be expected to use a local date though. Wedding date. And then I'm going to need to import local date. Again, be careful that you're reading here. This says add import for java.time.localDate. That is the option I want. I don't want to create my own class local date. That is going to mess things up. And then private string venue, and finally private int guests. A reminder that if they wanted a double here, they may very well, they probably wouldn't say double, they might just say real. So if you see something like a real, that's obviously a number that's got decimals, which means we want to put it into a double. Also keep in mind, I clearly don't have any class constants here. If I had a class constant, it would be all in capitals. So then I'd want to use the final keyword. And if it was underlined, I'd want to use the static keyword. Certainly, I'd expect to see that in your class diagram on Friday. And then we have some methods. So constructor, write code to create a constructor that accepts 4 strings and 1 integer as parameters. Bride's name, groom's name, wedding date, venue, and number of guests respectively. And then used to set the values of the 5 properties of the wedding class. Convert the wedding date called indate from a string. Okay, so very important, it's coming in as a string here, to a date object, and assign this value to the wedding date field. Reminder again, I know they say date, but we interpret that as local date. So let's do that. So public wedding. And here you would run into serious trouble if you sent indate in as a local date, because later on a question you're going to be told to send the parameter as a string. sorry, as a string, and if you were trying to accept a local date, you'd run into problems. So very important to pay attention to your class diagram. String in bride. Reminder, we have to get the names correct. String in groom. String in date. String in venue. Just capitalize string. And finally, int in guests. And there we go. We have our constructor. Let's just make this. There we go. Cool. So, what do I want to do now? Next question, obviously. Oh, sorry. I haven't actually finished this. I am being silly. So, bride equals in bride. So reminder, obviously, these are the fields. These are what I want to assign the values to, so I'm going to put them first. Okay, then groom equals in groom. Apologies, I'm quite tired as I'm doing this. And then I need to convert my string to a wedding date. So I think if I recall correctly, I can actually just say wedding date equals local date dot parse, and I'm going to parse in date. And at this point, I'm just going to double check the format. So if I take a look over here, it's coming in as year, month, day, which I think is the correct format. Otherwise, I'm going to need to put a pattern in here. But I think that'll be fine. The second I've finished coding this class, I'm actually just going to do a quick little test. And so we'll know quite quickly whether I need to do a little bit more work there or not. Then I have venue equals in venue. And finally, guests equals in guest. Guests. Okay, write code to create accessor methods for wedding date, venue, and guests. So public void, not void actually, string, local date, sorry. You can see over here, get wedding date is a date. So local date, get wedding date. And I'm going to return wedding date. Then my other accessor is get venue, which is a string, and get guest, which is an integer. So public string get venue. Public int get guests, which returns guests. I'd expect some kind of character handling in your test. And over here, write code a method to create a method called equals that returns a Boolean. So if we take a look, there's our equals that takes in a in-day date and an in-venue string. That returns a Boolean. This method should accept a date parameter. And I'm just going to reposition this quickly. There we go. Just got rid of some useless things so I could actually see all the writing. So yeah, so the method should accept a date parameter and a string parameter, which indicate a day and venue. It should return true if the wedding's date and venue properties match the date and venue, and false otherwise. So public Boolean equals, and I'm going to take a local date in day and a string in venue. That should be a comma, not a semicolon. And then essentially if in day dot is equal, so again I can't just do equals equals. A local date is an object. If I try and do equals equals, it's not going to work. It's going to just take if they're the same object as opposed to if they have the same value. So I'm just going to go if in day dot is equal to wedding date, and in venue dot equals venue. And if those are both true, then obviously everything equals. So I'm going to return true because they're equal. Otherwise, I will return false. The nice thing is we've now just created our own dot equals method for our wedding class. And then finally a toString that is standard, so I'm not going to waste your time coding that. And there we have it. Reminder to just double check that you have the format correct. And now I am going to deviate from the question paper, and I'm going to create my testing class. Should be a capital T, just in case you do that accidentally. Let's refactor, rename, capital T, and we should be good. Cool. And what I want to do is create a main method, and I'm going to create a wedding object. Temp equals new wedding, and let's literally send in the first line of the data file. So I want the first name is Chiquita Sanford. Then I have McGee Sosa. Then I'm going to send it the string, because remember our parameter asks for a string. 1611-05, and then a garden, and then 84. And let's just see if we can print this out. And if I can print this out, I am going to continue. And I can see over here I have got interestingly enough, something's gone wrong here, so we'll check that out. But otherwise, I've got the name tab, 84 guests. That looks good. I haven't tested the wedding date, but it didn't. I think it would have crashed when we did that, so we should in fact be fine. And over here, there we go. So I put the groom first and not the bride. I would have lost marks, and that's why it's important to test your code. You might not have picked that up if you tested right at the very end. That was a deliberate mistake. Sorry, that was a real mistake, by the way, not a deliberate one to try and persuade you to test. Okay, so we now want a new class called Booking Day. And as I look at this class, I realize that I've in fact been misinformed, and this does not have inheritance in it at all. But anyway, might as well continue with it. So I have some properties. I've created my class Booking Day, and I'm going to do my properties. Note that the garden and lake properties are objects of the class wedding, and they should not be visible from outside the class. So what we have here is some composition, which is very definitely in the syllabus. So I have local date, booking date. Remember private. Let's add that in. And then private wedding garden and private wedding lake. Right, I then want to create a constructor. Note that in addition to the booking date parameters, the second and third parameters are objects of the wedding class, which, okay, does tell us. I actually wouldn't expect them to be that explicit when you're writing the exam. So I have a local date in B date. I have a wedding that is in garden, and another wedding that is in lake. Okay, and relatively simple. So booking date equals in B date, lake, sorry, garden equals in garden, and our lake is equal to in lake, so nothing unexpected there. Then cool. write code to create a method called getOverbooked that should return a string indicating that venues, if any, are overbooked on the date. A venue is overbooked if the number of guests exceeds the capacity. This, in fact, is something where I'd expect them to have a constant. So I would have expected them to have created a constant in here with the capacities for a garden, capacities for a lake, and that I'd have to check them using those static variables. But so be on the lookout for something like that. So public string get overbooked. Okay, and doesn't take any parameters, but does return a string. And what it needs to tell me is how many we are past the capacity. Right. Interestingly enough here, so it doesn't say anything. I was just scanning it quickly. What would happen if it's not overbooked? So I'm not going to just add anything. I'm not just going to assume that that's what I need to do. So I'm literally just going to do what they want. So I will say return. I'm going to do it all as one thing. String. No, clown. I'm going to return. Sorry. A garden venue is overbooked by, and then the number is going to be my garden is 130, so it's going to be 130 minus garden dot get guests, and then I want to add a new line. Sorry, I need to add the word guests and then a new line, and then lake venue is overbooked by, and then I want to add over here, this is 160 minus lake dot get guests. Cool. And just double check that I have that right. Garden is 130, lake is 160. Cool. And it does ask for a new line. Well, so I'm going to add the word guests and then a new line. All right, and that should be that. And after looking at the question a little bit more closely, I scanned it, which is in fact really what I really shouldn't do. So it says here, determine the number of guests for each venue on that day and return a string containing information on which venue is overbooked and by how many guests. So we need to check and see if a venue is overbooked. So I can't all do this in one single return statement. So what I'm going to do here, and we also need to, so I'm going to have a quick string ret, and we're going to make that blank. Then I'm going to say if garden, and another thing that I've also seen over here is, when I was reading here to the toString, is that garden and lake might not be there. Okay, so they may be null, so I'm actually going to check that, because if garden is null, so if there is no actual garden wedding, and I try to do something like this, if garden dot get guests is greater than 130, then it is going to crash if it's null. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say if garden is not equal to null, and garden dot get guests is greater than 130, so we're definitely overbooked. Then ret is going to be ret plus garden venue is overbooked by, and I'll say 130 minus 4. No, you silly. I'm going to say garden dot get guests minus 130 plus guests plus a new line. Cool. And then similarly, if lake is not equal to null and lake.getGuests is greater than 160, I'm going to do the same thing. And so similarly here, so this can't be an if-else statement because the garden might be overbooked and the lake might be overbooked, and or the garden won't be and the lake will be, or the lake will be and the garden won't be, but they're independent of each other. So it can't be an else statement because it's not. It would only be an else statement if it was something like they'd said that we always book the garden venue first, and then after that the lake venue. So then you would know if there was no garden booking that there would definitely be no lake venue. So then you could have an else statement. So over here, this should be lake venue is overbooked by lake.getGuests, and I want to subtract 160. And I think that is now good, and then I can return ret, and let's get my toString. And as I said, I saw on the toString, so I've already had a look at this. Okay, and I am going to say return. No, I can't do it all as a return because once again these are going to be null, so I'm going to have to check for that. Okay, and if it is null, I would just return. Okay, if there's nothing, then I'm going to return no weddings booked. Otherwise, I imagine I only return something if it is booked. So once again, we're going to create a ret string. And I can make it equal to, I could just start it as a blank thing, but the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the booking date. So I might as well do that. And that is going to be NB date. Oh, it's not NB date. That's silly. It's just booking date. Dot. And I can just choose a toString, I think. That should give me that. And then I want a new line. And then if garden is not equal to null, then I'm going to output the word garden, and then a space, and then a semicolon, well, a full colon. And then I want the garden wedding details, which would be garden dot toString, and then a new line. Now I've got an A plus. And then if lake is not equal to null, I want to return a very similar thing, except I want lake, and I want the lake details. And then I want to add, oh, sorry. If both of those are null, so if garden is null and lake is null, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say ret plus equals no weddings booked. And they don't specify a new line, so I'll leave the new line out for now, and hopefully that won't be an issue. If it turns out that it looks like they forgot it, I'll come back and add it. And then I think actually that is, oh, I need the overbooking venue information. I think I can put this in an else because I won't have overbooking information if if there's no wedding. So I can put that in an else. I suspect it wouldn't matter too much. And then over here I can literally just say ret plus equals get overbooked, and because we catered over here that it's only going to return something if it is overbooked, that should work out nicely. And once again, I'm going to try and test things. So on test, I've got a wedding there, and then let's go wedding temp 2. Let's put one in the garden. And you know what, I can just make something up. So I'm going to say Mr. Gill. And you know what, let's be imaginative. Let's get married to Mrs. Gill. Actually, that just sounds weird given I'm not married. Let's get married to nobody. And then let's pick the same date. And let's put ourselves in the lake. And whatever, let's overbook this. Let's put 180 guests. Okay. And then what I want to do, I'm being silly. This is not a new garden. It's a wedding. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new booking day. I don't like the fact that there's an error somewhere. I forgot to return my string. There we go. Looks good. So let's create a booking day. And let's send, I think booking day wants a date. So local date.parse 2016-11-05. And then let's send our first, so booking day looks for a garden first and then a lake. So is a garden, so call temp, and then temp 2. We're going to have to add our local date over here. And so booking day needs a local date, wedding, and wedding. I am giving it, oh, my parse ends over there, which means I'll probably get rid of that bracket, and we're good to go. And I'm not printing out the right thing, so let's print out temp 3. And I can see it's there. I've got a garden wedding, I've got a lake wedding, and my lake wedding is overbooked by 20. That's cool. Let's just test and see if our garden overbooks. That's great. So gardens overbooked by 54. Let's try not sending a garden through. So instead of sending temp through, I'm going to send null. And there we go. That's great. It just prints that. And let's see what happens if we don't have any weddings. No weddings booked. And that looks good. Right. So next up is going to be our venue manager. And as is not unexpected, we're going to be creating some arrays. So I'm going to call it private WR equals new wedding 50. And then and I'm going to need a, it doesn't actually say I need a size counter for it. I'm going to read through and just see if it needs to be the exact size or if I can just assume it's going to be there. And after some looking, I can see over here that it actually tells us that we've got 50 bookings. So specifically, so it looks like we're probably not going to need our size counter. Which means that creating our wedding is going to be slightly different to normal. This is obviously a wedding array. And then I've got private, and I have got booking day array, and we'll call it BR, and that's a new booking array, booking day, sorry, and there are 30 of those. Okay, write code to create a constructor that's going to read the context of the file and create it up. So let's get that done. Okay, and scanner sc file equals new scanner. It does say the file name should be given as a string parameter. So string in file name. So it's a file, this new scanner, a new file of in file name. And I'm going to need to add a couple of things. So first, import file, import our scanner, and then it's going to want me to surround with a try catch. And I'm just going to start with an error, could not read from file. Right. So then I'm going to while scFile.has next line scanner scline equals new scanner from scFile.next line, and this, I think, our delimiter, let's open it up. Weddings.txt, our delimiter is a hashtag. I was thinking semicolon for some reason, but we'll put a hashtag in. Use delimiter hashtag. Then weddings.txt doesn't have any decimal values, but you never know, maybe we get something that does have a decimal value. So as a matter of course, I'm going to say scline.useLocale, and for some reason defaults to locale at Italy. I'm going to go with USA, so that'll give us a decimal point as opposed to the comma. Locale.us, not USA. Right, this needs to be a method, and I think we're good to go there. And then after this, it's just a case of getting everything out there. So we've got a bride, groom, date, venue, and guests. So string bride equals scline.next. String groom equals scline.next. String date venue. Oh, and in fact, our string is going to be sent as a date. If you recall, that's the parameter it takes. And then we have a string venue. But boring, it's just string after string after string. And then finally, a little bit of excitement because I have got int new guests equals scline.next int, which means guests should in fact be an int. Okay, now I can create a wedding object and add it to the array. I could actually, given that I know there are 50 weddings, I could do this as a for loop. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create my own int count equals 0. And I'm going to say wedding. Okay, yeah, I can actually just go straight into the wedding array. So wedding array count is equal to new wedding. And I'm going to add bride, groom, date, venue, guests. And that looks good. And then I'm going to increment count. Okay. Note that you do not need to create any booking day objects. That's quite convenient. And then write code that will create a method called list all weddings. That needs to be in its own method. It's going to return a string. And this, I think, is just a straightforward two strings. So we're going to go from 0 to 50 in this case, because we know it's going to be 50. And I'm going to say, let's have a string ret, which is going to be an empty string. And then I'm going to say ret equals ret plus wri.toString. And hopefully that's going to put it all in a new line, but we'll check that now. And I'm going to return that by going to my test. And I shouldn't need any of this anymore. But I should be able to create a venue manager. and I'm going to send it weddings.txt. And it's probably going to crash, but hopefully not. Not minus, that should be equals. And then let's print it out. Okay, and this should be vm.listAllWeddings. Okay, I am not getting onto a new line here, so I'm glad that I checked immediately. So I'm going to add it, and of course it's not going to new line. There we go. So if I run this now, that looks good. Okay, right, then write code to create a method called getWeddingsOnDay that will search the array for all weddings on a particular day and return a wedding object. This method should accept two string parameters. The first represents the date searched for, and the second the venue to search for. The method must return the wedding object that occurs on that day and that venue. If no match is found, return null, and there will only ever be at most one wedding venue. So that's actually quite cool. Any search is acceptable. Our data isn't sorted, so I don't need to do a binary search or anything like that. So public string, sorry, no, this must return the wedding object. Get weddings on day. I don't know why it's called get weddings, considering we're specifically told we're only ever going to send get one wedding, but in any case, accept two string parameters. So string in date and string in venue. And I want to say, again, we're going to go through to 50, and I'm going to say if WRI dot equals, and this is where we're going to use our local date. So this is a string, so I'm going to have to convert it into a local date for us. So I'm going to say local date dot parse in date, and then I'm going to send it in venue. So if they're equal, then return WRI. And that, I think, will work. Just needs to get our local date going over there. And assuming we don't find it, then I'm going to return null. I've now satisfied all return paths, so we look good. Let's see if we can test this out. So let's find a day where there's a wedding. 2016 11/10. VM dot get weddings on day, and then the date is going to be 2016-11-10. And our venue for that wedding on 2016-11-10, if I can find it. I can't, so I'm just going to arbitrarily pick another one to test. 26-11-08 in the garden. And there we go. We can see we're getting the wedding between Vivian Dillon and Abdul McNeil. Let's just check if that is correct. It was on 11:08, Vivian Dillon. Cool. All right, let's try search for a lake on 11:08. Okay, we do have one. Let's pick it. Okay, you know what? There's nothing happening in 2018. Okay, and I have got null. Presumably in my next thing I'm going to adjust that somewhere. Cool, and then finally a method called process bookings that'll populate the bookings array with booking day objects and return a string with information from each booking. Okay, so create a date for each day in November. ascertain the garden and lake wedding books for that day, if any. Create a new booking day object using correct parameters. Our booking day takes in a date and the weddings. Add the object to the array, and then return a string containing the information of each booking day object on a new line. Okay, doesn't seem too complicated. So public string process bookings. And I'm literally just going to go with an int from 0 to 30. And then I need to create a date for each day in November. So I'm going to just do a little bit of string manipulation here. So first thing I'm going to say is say string is if I is less than 10. I want to start from 1 and I want to go up to and including 30. So if I is less than 10, then my string date is going to be nothing. And that's going to be, string day is going to be nothing. And then if it's less than 10, then I'm going to say day equals I plus, equals 0 plus I, and that's just going to give me my 01, 02, 03, 04. Cool. Else a day is just going to be equal to I. It's not going to want me to put an integer into there, so if I add an empty string, then we'll quite happily do that. Okay, so I think I've got my day working nicely. So now I can create local date inside my for loop. Local date is equal to local date dot parse, and I want to give it 2016 plus 2016-11 and another dash, and then I want to add day. Okay, so that should give me a date, and then I'm going to ascertain the garden wedding lake bookings booked for that day, if any. That's mildly irritating over here because it actually wants the string, the in date as a string. I suppose I can just rebuild the string. So I can say wedding wed equals get weddings on day, and I can send it 2016-11- plus day, and then the string garden wedding wed 2 is get weddings on day 2016-11- plus day, and then lake. Okay, that's cool. So I've found the garden and lake weddings for that day, if there are any, and I'm going to create a new booking day object. So I can say booking day. In fact, I can add it straight to br I -1, and that's important here because I'm using I as my date, going from 1 to 30. My BR is going to go from 0 to 29, so when I say BR I -1, if I did have my loop going from 0 to 30, then this would be BRI, and over here for my day I would have just had to add 1 to I. And I would have to have done it like that in brackets, because if I didn't do that, it would literally add the value of I and then append the value 1, whereas this would add 1 to I and then add it as a string. Okay, so BRI -1 equals new booking day, and I'm going to send it what I need. I'm going to send it the date, a wed, and wed 2. Ooh. And I think that should work. Booking day has got a 2 string. but I need a string for each booking day object. It's going to be silly to, I was thinking that I could like scan through the whole array here, but instead, I can literally just add them as I'm going there. So ret equals ret plus br I minus 1 dot toString. And I want a new line. Alrighty, let's see if that works. No. Oh, I forgot to return my string. Alright, I think this will work, but you never know. So let's try it out. So instead of the get weddings on day, let's print out vm dot process bookings. Need another close bracket. Let's test it out, and we have a problem. Okay, there we got something. We've got 2016-11, 2016-5. Did I make a typo? I did over here for weddings 2. This should be 2016 instead of 2016-5. Let's try that again. Reading the error message is very helpful, and this looks good. So I've got 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. We've got some overbooked coming in. We've got a day where there's no weddings booked. Looks like I might want to add a new line after no weddings booked. So let's go to booking day. And if it's no weddings booked, I need to add a new line. Let's try that again. And see if I can find a no weddings booked. There we go. It's separated nicely now. So we're looking good so far. Right, I'm now going to do wedding UI, and this is probably now I no longer need my test class, because my test class is basically going to be wedding UI. I'm not going to rename it or anything. I'm going to recreate it from scratch. PSVM, so I want a main method. And so we've created WI. Declare and instantiate a venue manager object at the appropriate place. So venue manager VA, whoopsie, equals new venue manager. Oh, should be an E there. Venue manager. New venue, okay. Being silly. New venue manager. Okay, let's just have a quick look. What does venue manager require any? It does, it needs a file name, and I know that because I've done it already. Weddings.txt. I don't actually think this bit is case sensitive. Just force of habit to try and get the cases to match. Okay, it does say, in fact, call the constructor using weddings.txt as the file name argument, and then write code that will display the following. So, va dot that's interesting. Oh, no, that is interesting. Va dot should probably be calling it VM. Not that that's the issue. Venue manager, everything's private. We've got those those things. I have no idea why I can't. Right, I'm just going to pause this quickly so you don't see me just staring at the screen for like 20 minutes. weirdest error, which I think was NetBeans being buggy. So unless VA means something specific, because I changed that. Well, I first tried with the VM because that worked on the previous one. That was fine. VY is all good. Let's go back to VA. And that is a very strange error. Weird. But in any case, so let's just stick with our venue manager. So VM dot list all weddings, and then finally VM dot process bookings. So they didn't ask for any headings here. Do look out for headings because those are awarded marks. I now need to write code and display a simple monthly calendar for a month of 30 days. It'll have a column for each day of the week, and the rows will indicate the individual weeks and which days fall in the day of the week. Note the calendar will vary depending on which day of the week the first of the month. In the example above, the first month is on a Thursday, and they progress accordingly. Should be able to accept any starting day. So I'm going to be sent a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, and then display the calendar accordingly. All right, and so if I take a look at this, the first thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need some custom code to do the first line, because I think the first line I'm going to have a number of blanks, and then some dates put in. And then these ones here, these lines should actually be quite straightforward and standard. And then this last one's going to be custom as well. So write code to add a method called display calendar. And it should accept an integer parameter containing the day of the week and return a string. Okay, so display calendar. And it should set an int parameter, so int day number. Cool. And then I think that is everything in terms of parameters. So the first thing I want to do is looks like we've tabbed. And hopefully, they'd give us some more info. In an actual exam, but any case. So I'm going to say string ret equals m/t, m/t, q/t, w/t, th/t, f/t, SA/t, and then Sunday. And I've probably messed something up here somewhere. I typed a close bracket instead of a quote. And let's just return ret, and let's just see if we actually got that going quite nicely. So I'm going to have to add it to display calendar. So let's just try that. VM.display calendar, and I'm going to send it 3, not that it matters at this stage. And I've got a Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They haven't told us what the spacing is here. You can't be expected to just randomly guess what the spacing is. If you have a look, they've got the 3 lined up in the middle of 10. There is no way that you can do that in Java, so I'm not going to worry about that. Right, let's go back to our display calendar. So we've got our return string for the days of the week. And then I want to do the first line. So, if I'm on the day 1 of the week, then I want to add no spaces. Day 2, I want to add 1 space. If I'm on day 3, I want to add 3 spaces. If I'm on day 4, I want to add 4 spaces. If I'm on day 7, I want to add 6 spaces. So it looks to me, I call them spaces, but it's actually going to be tabs. So it looks to me that what I want to do is I want to keep going from, I want to go from 0 while we're less than day. So, you know what? I'm going to start at 1. I want to keep going while we're less than day number. So if I send in a 1, I'm not going to add any spaces, which is correct. If I send in a 2, then I is going to start at 1. It'll do it once, add a space, then it will make I equal to 2, which will no longer be less than 2. So that looks about right. And, oh, I forgot to add a new line over here. So let's add a new line after Sunday. Also got rid of that bracket. And then I should now be able to go ret plus equals tab. And that's going to add 1 tab for each day that's missing. And then I can say, so then if I'm on day 1, if I was on day 1, I wouldn't put any spaces, and then I want to literally get 7 days. If I was on day 2, I want to get 6 days. If on day 3, I want to get 5 days. If I'm on day 4, I want to get 4 days. So it looks like I want to send 8 minus day number. And that should give us, if our day number is 1, I want to print 7 days. 8 minus 1 would give me 7 days. So I think that's right. So do another int for it. I'm going to start with I at 1. And I want to keep going while we're less than or equal to, and I think it was 8 minus a day number. And I want to say ret plus equals, and then I want the day, I. And let's test that out. And here you can see I'm testing all the time because it's complicated code. I haven't done it before. For some reason, I'm not printing it out. Display calendar. And let's send it a 1. And that's great. Would have been even greater if I'd remembered to add a tab after the numbers. Let's see if it's greater now. I can get rid of test. And oh, I sent it a 3. So starting on day 3, that looks good. In fact, let's test what happens if I send it a 1. I was just in temp doing the thing. I knew I had display calendar. 1 is looking good. Let's start on day 7. And that looks great. Okay, now I want to add standard lines. So I'm now going to be going in groups of 7. How am I going to figure out when to stop here? If I want to stop here, I think I basically want to stop when there's less than 7 days left. So given that we're going with a 30-day month, I think I want to stop if 30 minus the current value that we're on is less than 7. So I think I can literally just do a straightforward for loop, continuing on from this. So let's not create a new I. I could also do some subtraction to get that, but you know, I is going to be the right value, I think. Let's just test that. So I certainly want to move to a new line. You know what, let's just do it. Okay, so 4. And then I've got I, which doesn't need to be set equal to anything because it should be the right value from this already. And I'm going to keep going while there's 7 days left, which I think is going to be 30 minus, so while 30 minus I is greater than 7. That might need to be greater than or equal to. Rather than spending ages trying to figure it out, I'm literally just going to test it and see if I need to make that an equal to or not. And want to keep incrementing I. Okay, and what I want to do over here is, we're over here, not a for int I. Of course, it's complaining about that. Can I do something silly like I equals I? I can. Okay, all right. Let's carry on. I mean, I could have done a new j. I could have gone for j equals I, and done that, I suppose. Now, what I want to do is I want to go. First thing I want to do is I want to add a new line. So let's add a new line before we get started. And then basically what I want to do is I just want to add I. And then what I want to do is I want to say, so have I gone 7 days here? Not. Okay, so if count is greater than 6, I think, I want to add a new line. And let's just see what this does. And let's make wedding UI the main file. And that's great. We're not getting any new lines. We are successfully carrying on with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 32. Sorry, all the way up to 22. Might need a greater than equal to. And then presumably then if I count up the rest of the days, it's 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That would be 7. So in fact, I could do that. So I think I want to keep going while 30 minus I. So I want this to go up to 24. Let's see if I'm going the right way. No, I'm getting too small. So perhaps I want to go while we're greater than or equal to 6. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 is 6 days. Okay, that looks good, I think. Okay. Oh, hang on. I'm being an idiot. I can just go up to 30. I don't need to print spaces at the end. Okay, so I can literally keep going while I is less than 30. That was silly of me. Because yeah, while less than or equal to 30, because we print 30 and then we just stop. I don't need to print additional spaces. I am being silly. Now, I've done all of this if count greater than 6, create a new line, but I haven't actually incremented count. And then certainly also what I'd want to do is I'd want count to go back to 0. Let's test that. That looks good. So let's test with a few more things. If I can find a venue manager. No, wedding UI. So we're starting on day 7. Let's start on day 1. That looks good. Let's start on day 2. That looks good. Let's start on day 3. Day 4. I mean, I might as well. I can test it comprehensively, so I might as well. Day 6. Ooh, wrong button. I don't want to debug. And we tested 7 already. Okay, so the key here was just realizing that we need to do something differently, and that I need to print a certain number of spaces before I get started, which I did, and I then did the number of days. I think I could have put it all in one for loop if I did some complicated maths. And then, yeah, and over here, like, instead of this silly, how are we suddenly, I could have sworn I got rid of this code. Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, this was just me adding, sorry, this was me adding the numbers on the first line. And then over here, yeah, I equals I is a bit weird. I could have made this J, but in any case, let's just take a look at their solution. And what they've done. Okay, so the first, they've just added some spacing over here. I use tabs. They didn't indicate how many spaces, so I think my use of tabs is fine. Okay, and they're just adding over here, they're just adding the spaces. And then if I is less than 10, okay, they're adding that. And there they've done the fancy, as I said, some fancy maths to make it one if. I could have done that, but I'm tired, and this perhaps might be a little bit more understandable for you, and I'm pretty certain they'd have to give it full marks. And there we go.